I was all dressed when he came up with the breakfast tray and we ate silently. It wasn't a bad idea because I was already wondering how to take my bath with him in the room. I had already thought of entering the bathroom with my body cream and clothes, with the door locked behind me. We drove to his parents' home to say good morning to them and some other relatives who had expected to see us yesterday but had gone home before our arrival. We later drove past the Onitsha main market for sightseeing and ended up in a busy street where they sell ladies' wear, shoes and bags. After shopping, we drove back to the hotel. He insisted that we go up and pick up our things and leave for Lagos immediately because it had already been 2 weeks since he returned from Lagos for this marriage event. He thought it was the perfect time to cross the Onitsha Head Bridge without heavy traffic. He asked me to pick the best clothes and shoes I love and go up first to change while he paid the bill at the reception. I went up, changed into my new clothes and started packing his things, which were scattered everywhere. By the time he came up, I had packed all his things, dressed the bed, and cleaned the table and the toilet. He busted out laughing as if I had done something wrong. But when he noticed my perplexity, he first thanked me for packing his things and then explained I didn't need to dress the bed or clean the table and toilets since the room attendants must change the used bed sheets for the new clients coming to take the room. I laughed at myself, my local sense of presumption. I had assumed that the room was his exclusive reserve and I had cleaned it up, presuming that he will still return to the same room on his next visit, since he had no room in his father's house. Why on earth did I not even think of it? We finally hit the road and I was looking to see the famous Onitsha Head Bridge, which we have studied in civics and history, but have not had the opportunity to see live. Our teachers told us that the Biafran army had to blow up the bridge to stop the advancement of a Nigerian army led by Lieutenant Olusegun Obasanjo. This brilliant act became a temporary saving grace for the commercial city of Onitsha, as the army of mass destruction has to go all the way to Bida and return almost a year later through Abagana, after suffering a massive deterrent caused by the locally Biafran-made landmine called Obunigwe, mass killer. As told enthusiastically by a history teacher, that was a piece of history. I don't remember the other details precisely. However, I remember vividly that the bridge was rebuilt with the same heavy metal structure, almost precisely as it was initially. A few minutes later, Mr. Eddie pointed ahead to show me the bridge. It became more visible as we approached. Finally, we got on the bridge, and according to the description, it was massive indeed, with walkways for pedestrians on both sides. The amazing thing was that the human movement on foot was as busy as the vehicular movement on both sides of the bridge. I was amazed at the massive, endless iron structures that even seemed to have a roof on top. The SUV we traveled in gave me a clear view of the bridge, and I even looked down to observe the water below. It was at the peak of the dry season, and I could see pockets of land inside the river and the abandoned Onitsha Inland Port commissioned by President Shagari. I couldn't imagine how a ship could ever arrive at that fictitious port. But what came to mind was the possibility of transforming those pockets of land into a fresh vegetable garden at this time of the year, if I were to be living around there. As I struggled to look up to see the same heavy iron covering the top of the bridge like a roof, Mr. Eddie noticed my curiosity. He smiled at me, stretched out his hand and pressed a button on the dashboard of his car. The top opened in just a few seconds, like the cave of Ali Baba and the 40 Thieves, which opened at the mention of the magic phrase, "Open Sesame." I looked at him and wondered how he read my mind, and I relaxed and enjoyed the panoramic view of every angle. There were flocks of hawkers of food, beverages and assorted wares. Each tried to attract passengers' attention in private cars and public transport buses. We bought some cold drinks and snacks as we approached the end of the bridge. Once we got back on the highway, Eddie started speeding like never before, as if someone were competing with him as we headed towards Asaba. We had a smooth ride to Umunede before making our first stop He pulled over in what seemed to be a farmer's market for fruits and vegetables and asked me to shop for the house. He kept babying me around and reminding me I was the woman of the house. We stuffed the car with assorted fresh items, including yams, potatoes, vegetables, plantains, etc. They also had these special fried plantain chips that were very long and crispy. We continued our journey to Ore town where we stopped for lunch. Though it was already 4 o'clock, it was chaotic. Every restaurant had people stepping in and out endlessly. He took me to the one he called his customer and ordered soup with bushmeat, forgetting that I was a village girl. What he considered exotic meat was very regular meat for me in the village. The last bit of the journey became the most stressful as we met with an endless traffic jam in a place he described as Redemption City Camp Junction. He said it is the campground and international headquarters of a Redeemed Christian Church of God. It took us almost the same time from Onitsha to Ore to travel from that Redemption City camp to his house in the Okota area of Lagos. We arrived exhausted at about 11 p.m. When we arrived at his home, there was no light, just as he had predicted. I had expected an enormous mansion with gatesmen and maids. So it seemed on our arrival, he pulled up before a gate and blasted the horn as if the entire street were expecting his arrival. A Megad, a generic name for Hausa gatekeepers, opened the door as if to say, "I know who just arrived." He greeted him with a bow and closed back the gate. He returned to welcome us again, then went straight to open the boot of a jeep. "Hold on," Mr. Adaeze said. "Put on the generator first and you can bring the things later." I opened the door and stepped down from the car. I was looking at the massive entrance door, but just like a new chicken in a new house, they taught me to stand on one leg and observe the environment before putting down the order. This common sense was helpful because, left alone, I would have walked to that entrance door and waited for him to open the door. He started walking towards the back side of the house, and the Megad followed him. I stood on one foot like the proverbial chicken in a new house and waited for further instructions. A few minutes later, I heard the generator as he went on, but the mansion did not light up, though I could see that the security light behind it went on. They returned to the car and he motioned me to come. I picked my new traveling bag, which he used to replace my infamous Ghana Must Go Utah bag, and we ended up at the boys' quarters beside the mansion. We returned to the car several times to bring in all the foodstuffs and all the things we brought home. He gave the Megad some foodstuff and some leftover drinks from the journey. Then we finally went into the house and turned on all the lights to ensure that his things were still the way he had left them because, according to him, sometimes thieves might break in from the back wall and empty your house while the gateman comfortably sat at the gate. It was a 2-bedroom house with a small parlor, an inbuilt kitchen, and one bathroom. It looked well furnished but very unkempt, to use a kinder word. I understood it might not mean he's dirty, but perhaps he doesn't have enough time to put things in order. I purposely demanded to ease myself to have a good view of what I had just experienced. The mirror in the toilet looked as dirty as if he had never cleaned it since he moved in. The hanger was overflowing with dirty linens, and the floor seemed to rejoice as if to say, "I hope you understand that my chairman was a celebrated bachelor who just couldn't take care of me." I returned to the parlor and walked into the kitchen with the excuse of putting away the foodstuff we brought home. When I turned on the lights, I caught some happy cockroaches dancing on the sink, but they quickly disappeared into the various cracks and hideouts. I smiled and promised to settle scores with them much sooner than later. I noticed he was observing my dissatisfaction or disappointment. What I saw right before my eyes did not reflect what he sold himself for, at least to my parents. I wish my father would appear now and allow the words Shakespeare spoke through Portia in The Merchant of Venice to flow through his narrow-minded heart. I stopped for a while and said those words in a low voice. "All that glitters is not gold. Often have you heard that told. Many a man his life has sold, but my outside to behold. Indeed, golden as a tomb might be, worms will always find their way inside." I became dumbfounded as I couldn't see any trace of my brother who was supposed to live in his house. One mind told me to ask immediately, while the other asked me to keep calm and stand on one foot until further notice. I stepped back to the sitting room, stretched my arms, and hugged him to his amazement. I whispered into his ear saying, "Baby, do not worry. I will gradually understand your stress." Compassion prevailed over my anger as I understood the circumstances that might have compelled him to live a life of lies, and I forgot my sorrows. My bitterness subsided, and I decided to exhibit once again the human nature trapped inside me. That instinct was what moved me into giving Mr. Eddie a warm hug and even calling him baby against all odds and prejudice that had dominated my heart since the first day he came to ask for my hand in marriage. The hug lasted longer than expected as he held me tight and searched for my lips. He had his way with a kiss, and I didn't resist much. I felt somehow relieved that the situation I saw on the ground humbled him and made him look even more human in my eyes. I was supposed to be mad at discovering that he deceived my entire clan into believing that he was swimming in an ocean of wealth, and that any woman he married should consider herself lucky and favored. I felt more anger towards my father than towards him, and I said this brief prayer in the same pattern as Jesus did. "Father, forgive him, for he knew not what he did." I thought of my mother and wished I could share some of my experiences with her, but they had no mobile phone with which I could reach them. I remembered it was the one gift she asked me to send to her once I got to Lagos, a mobile phone. She probably believed that her son-in-law must have some mobile phones littered around his house. I gave the room a quick mop to make it less dusty and changed the bed sheets on the giant bed in his room. I confessed that I did it with bias, knowing or instead imagining that the last girl he slept with didn't bother to change the sheets. Whether I was right or wrong didn't matter, as I had a rapid flashback to his conversation with the last girl who claimed to be pregnant by him. I especially remember the concluding part of that discussion, in which the lady asked him to leave his village wife and return to Lagos because she was expecting a baby for him. I had mixed feelings about leaning on this excuse to break away from the marriage and find my way home, but my inner self urged me to stay put and help him out of the big mess he had created around him. That urge subdued every other thought of running away and returning home to my parents, dependent on whatever shame they might claim I had brought upon them by abandoning my marriage. As I battled with these stressful and life-threatening thoughts, I remembered the joy radiating from my brother's face the day he left with Mr. Eddie. Now that I think of the bogus imagination he had in his mind and his philosophy of going ahead of me to occupy my future mansion until I come, I feel like laughing out loud. However, I decided to keep mute and allow sleeping dogs to lie. I wouldn't let his issue rob me of my much-needed night's rest after such a long day on the road. I reminded myself again to stand on one leg like a newly purchased chicken. I started thinking about the sleeping arrangements, considering I was alone with Mr. Eddie and the Megad in the compound. No matter how hard I screamed, the Megad would not take me seriously since Eddie introduced me as his wife. I was now more concerned about the pain his first attempt at breaking my virginity would cause. Some girls had horrible experiences on their first trial. I sincerely wished I could wish this nightmare away or postpone it as much as possible. As we sat in the parlor eating the takeaway dinner we bought, I took the bull by the horns and told him I had some fears and concerns. That caught his attention, and he asked me to share the concern with him. I had never had such a confrontation with an older person, apart from the hot exchange of words I once had with my secondary school teacher when he attempted to lure me into having a relationship with him. The teacher had approached me under the pretext of wanting to help me prepare for a state science competition. He was my science teacher, and his initial demeanor was that of a good Samaritan who discovered a clever student and wanted to help her to higher places. He made me believe I was his favorite, and he was out to help me shine. He invited me to his house for the technical trial, which he claimed required a one-on-one audition where he would play the moderator and I will respond to the question by looking at myself in a big mirror. The very first day I went to his house for the audition, all went well for the first round of questions. He then went to his fridge to get a cold drink for refreshments. He brought a tray with 2 glasses already filled. He asked if I would like some biscuits and I said yes. As he went to get the biscuits, I ingeniously switched the glasses and started drinking mine before he came back. He sat beside me and gulped down his glass while I slowly ate the biscuits. Strangely enough, he gradually started losing coordination of speech until he slowly fell asleep. I quickly picked up my school bag, closed the door, and ran home. The next day in class, he couldn't look into my eye, knowing that I had caught him plotting to rape me. After school, I walked home innocently, unaware that he had gone ahead of me and was waiting at the junction that led to my house. It wasn't an easy confrontation, but I gave him a piece of my mind. I looked into Eddie's eye and said, "Baby, I told you this story verbatim. I'm pleading with you not to follow that selfish path, as it will end our fragile relationship. I was coerced into this marriage, but I've promised to grow into its big shoes, knowing that time and tide heal all wounds." He held my hands with both hands, and I could see compassion written on his face. He looked into my tearful eyes and gave me a gentle peck. I suspect I might have married a prophet without knowing it. He paused for a while and then said, "I must confess to you, I had in mind doing the same thing tomorrow. But not because I wanted to rape my wife, but simply because I was thinking it would be less traumatic for you knowing the pains that go with breaking virginity." "Thank you, Lord," I screamed aloud. I would have done something harsh and stupid if I had woken up and found myself violated in my sleep. It's a trauma and a nightmare I had lived with for a long time. Thank God for the wisdom coming out of this moment of truth between us. "Thank you for calling me baby a few moments ago," Eddie said. "Can you call me that from now on, please?" In exchange, I promised to patiently wait until you decide to offer your virginity on a platter of gold to me as your husband. I'd always believed that you were pretending all this while. Even your father told me not to worry, that when I take you home to my mansion, you will relax and become a perfect wife. Now I know he was wrong. Mr. Eddie, oh sorry, my baby. Baby. Was my father wrong, or did you deceive him into believing that a mansion and a super mansion were waiting for me both in Onitsha and Lagos? Even my siblings believed the same story and were rolling all over themselves, believing that you have brought heaven into their lives. Now, where are the mansions? In Onitsha, it was a hotel room. Now, the villa has mutated into a boys' quarters in Lagos. Am I living a nightmare, hoping to wake into the reality of their imaginations? My only consolation is that I believed none of their fairy tales because I was busy plotting how to escape from home daily. It was getting late into the night and he pleaded to move for an adjournment until tomorrow morning as he was fatigued. We had an accord concordial, as I often heard my father say, about an agreement K.O. Mbakwe, the then governor of Imo State, struck with the ruling National Party of Nigeria (NPN). Despite being a member of the opposition party, the Nigerian People's Party (NPP), Governor Mbakwe was able to strike what he called an accord concordial with the ruling party, the National Party of Nigeria (NPN). Mbakwe, according to my father, nicknamed himself the Weeping Governor in his determination to get equal treatment notwithstanding his belonging to the opposition party, which under normal circumstances should be at loggerheads with the federal authorities. When applied to my situation with Mr. Eddie, this parallel situation translated into sharing his giant bed, which he egoistically nicknamed the National Stadium. We built a separating wall in the middle with 2 pillars, and he promised not to violate the barrier across the border as we defined it. He later called it the Berlin Wall.